But yeah, so today is our first episode of Conversations with, and today we have Jessica.Dodge.
Hello.
Hello, Jessica.
Hi.
How are you?
Good. How are you?
I'm good. So Jessica, she is a co-owner of Goosehead Insurance here locally in Metro Detroit. She does pretty much all the policies here for our office in Max Realty, and she works with agents and loan officers all across the metro area.
I do.
Nice.
Yes, thank you.
Absolutely. So tell us a little bit about your background, Jess, kind of where you started and kind of how you landed in the insurance world.
So I guess it started 2013. I started working at Rocket Mortgage as a loan officer, as many of us all did.
Yeah.
And I worked there for 10 years I was loan officer, I was a processor, I was an underwriter for the last couple years there. And then after speaking with you, I guess, it worked out to where it was the right time to kind of make the jump and the leap of faith and go into Goosehead Insurance and launch an insurance franchise.
Nice. Yeah. That's awesome. I think insurance is one of those things that, in the loan officer world, in the real estate world, it's just something that we all kind of know is needed, but it's kind of just like there, and it's like weird where it's like, who do you use for insurance? Some people are like, I don't know, we just kind of send it out, or we let the client pick, or we don't even mention it at all.
Right.
So at the end of the day, having somebody that's a go-to that you can reach out to that knows what the hell they're doing is super important. So we're excited to have you in our business every single day in that regard. When it comes to the insurance world, I think a lot of people have a lot of misconceptions.
Yes.
What would you say the most common thing that you feel like you have to educate people in our industry, people not in our industry, clients, realtors, loan officers? What's that thing you feel like you have to educate people the most about insurance?
So there's a few, but I was going to say mostly I'm educating other professionals like real estate agents or loan officers, mostly loan officers, just because most times the low ball of the quote when you're giving a pre-approval.
Makes sense. Yeah.
And unless you're experienced or you kind of know that area in particular, you kind of just go off what your platform is estimating, and most times it's around $100 a month. But depending on where your client is buying at, that could be a little bit tricky.
Yeah. Especially here in Metro Detroit, I think nationwide, insurance seems to be a lot less unless you're in like the hot spots in like California or Florida or something crazy. But in Detroit, right, we see it all the time where somebody will come in and say, hey, I got a client that's pre-approved, and we're like, all right, awesome. And then they go under contract for the property. Then the loan officer eventually is like, oh yeah, well, I have them pre-approved for insurance for $1,500, and it's a $300,000 property in University District, and it's like that insurance is going to be $2,300 to $3,000 in most cases. So that's going to change somebody's debt to income ratio, which could hurt them as far as qualifying for that property.
For sure, especially too with all these down payment assistance programs or little niche things, that grants and things that clients can apply for. Sometimes there's even more restrictions and overlays with that, so that could really be detrimental sometimes. So.
Yeah, that sucks.
Yeah.
That sucks, but that's why we want to educate, right?
For sure.
From a loan officer perspective, from a client perspective as well, we want to make sure that everyone understands, like, hey, that pre-approval, what is on there, what's qualifying you at the end of the day, and that loan officers know, hey, here's what the range is going to be in those areas in particular. And I'm sure you get those conversations all the time. Loan officers like, hey, I got someone pre-approved, roughly how much is this going to be? Or, hey, can you shoot me a quick approval? I'm sure everybody wants the quick approval.
Oh, for sure.
Like, what do you think it's going to be? It's like, well, I got to know the client, run through the system, know what area. I can't just throw up random quotes in the air. But,
right. Yeah. I mean, there are some outliers where you just know, like, okay, I've done a handful of these. This is kind of what it's going to be like. Or this carrier doesn't really care so much about prior claims history or whatever. But there are so many nuances that I could give you a range, but it's going to be a big range unless I have the full picture. So.
Makes sense. And again, you mentioned carriers. So you're an insurance broker.
Yes.
So you have multiple carriers. Like, how many carriers are you currently working with?
Multiple carriers, probably around 30. I wouldn't say 30 for each line of business. Okay. Most obviously, home and auto is a heavy hitter. I have a lot of majority of the carriers are for that. But Then there's jewelry, there's a few flood carriers, a few niche carriers that are in the surplus lines for those harder to place homes. So we've got lots of options, and really just finding out who has the appetite for what.
Yeah, correct. Like what insurance carrier wants to accept what risk?
Right.
Essentially, at the end of the day.
Exactly.
What factors influence the cost of homeowners insurance the most, what you would say?
So this has been a really big thing recently. I want to say in the last 6 months, it's been one carrier following another in the world of, okay, how old is the roof? If it's over 10 years old, we're not giving full replacement cost coverage on it. Or the age of the home. A lot of the homes in Detroit where we work mostly are 1920s, 1930s. So if a home is over 100 years old, some carriers have an appetite for it, some don't. Or just on top of, prior claims history with your own insurance claims, just the intricacies of the age of the big hitters, roof, furnace, all of that stuff. So
makes sense. Yeah, because that could vary, right? But I imagine, right, if a carrier is like, oh wait, we're getting dinged, or people are calling us because their roof has an issue, and their foundation has an issue, so they're probably saying like, hey, how can we find a less risky way to go about it? So they're probably just trying to get in front of it from the get-go and go, hey, what are all the things we need to ask before we give you a policy that we could maybe raise your policy? So that way we don't wait until you call us and say, hey, you need a $30,000 roof, if we could have asked up front. So.
Well, roofs are huge too, because a lot of people have been for years, using it when they need it or as a maintenance policy, which is what these insurance companies are trying to avoid paying for.
Correct.
So now if you have sometimes the wind and hail deductibles, so if your house is ruined by wind and hail versus a fire, your fire deductible, you can go as low as $1,000, but wind and hail they're now moving it towards 1%.
Oh wow.
And that's 1% of your full house coverage replacement cost.
Yeah, the replacement cost of the house, not what you bought it for.
Right.
That number can be completely different.
Yeah, and that's something that gets confusing too for some people is, well, I'm only buying this house for $150,000, but it's in a historical district in Detroit. It's got all mahogany, wood, everything, all these cool characters which we love about these houses. But the replacement cost if you had a total loss and the house was to burn down, to rebuild it would be probably north of $400,000, because they include debris removal, cost of labor and materials. So the replacement cost is what the insurance companies go off of,
correct,
not what you're actually buying the house for.
Exactly. Yeah. Two completely different things. What you bought the house for and what we could rebuild it for.
Yeah, right? And if you're getting a mortgage, it has to be covered at full replacement cost. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about that.
Yeah, that makes sense. That makes sense. What would you say as far as being a homeowner? Hey, I'm looking to buy a property. At what stage in the process should a home buyer be looking at the homeowner's insurance?
I would say probably within your inspection period.
Okay.
And that's something that you and your realtor will have a discussion about if you're buying a house. So you don't necessarily need a finalized policy within that point, but just reach out and see, what the quote pricing's going to be, so that we can update your lender and make sure that there's no surprises as we get closer to closing.
Absolutely. Yeah. I love that. That makes so much sense because, again, imagine a situation where, again, a lender did put $100 a month and it's really going to be $250. Right? That's going to affect one thing, of course, your direct monthly payment, but then the second thing is going to affect is how much you bring to the closing table.
Yes.
So you really want to know both of those things as early as possible in the process. You don't want to wait until, you got the house under contract, you passed the inspection period, the appraisal's done, you're super excited.
You've got $1,500 invested of your own money before the closing costs, but 9 times out of 10, everyone's like, I'm almost cleared to close. The last thing I need is my insurance. Can you help me out? And also, you get an early shopping discount with 99% of the companies if you shop within 2 weeks of closing. So 2 weeks or earlier, you get a discount. So
that's good to know.
Extra savings.
Extra savings. So what are questions a buyer should ask as they're shopping for insurance?
as they're shopping for insurance, definitely ask about being in a flood zone, because 9 times out of 10, us insurance brokers can find that out before your mortgage company will. Mm-hmm. So that's huge, because if you are in a high-risk zone, double your insurance, and mm-hmm. that should be what you're paying. Other heavy hitters are probably the endorsements. Mm-hmm. Is sewer line coverage on there, is water backup coverage on there. So many times they leave those out, but you can get quite a bit of coverage for around $100, $200 a year extra, and it's mm-hmm. totally worth it. Also, just make sure your deductibles are comfortable for you, which is what you're responsible for out of pocket. So if you make a claim, say you have a fire, you make a claim for $80,000. If your deductible is $5,000, that's what you're responsible for before your insurance hits. So as long as you're willing to take that risk, those are big things. Everything else is pretty much automatically included on a primary home policy. Mm-hmm. But those 3 things I would say are important.
Okay, makes sense. I think people, when you're going into insurance, right, you go, okay, hey, I'm looking to buy a house. Odds are I think people initially just go to, I'm going to use whoever my car is currently with, right? Because they think they just want to bundle it and move on. Mm-hmm. So explain to us kind of how that works, or, in cases of situations that maybe you've seen in the past where maybe even going with another company and bundling with that company could make more sense for somebody.
Yeah, so I always highly suggest bundling. That's where you can save more than a couple $100 most times. Mm-hmm. But just automatically assuming you'll get that deal with whoever you have for your car insurance isn't always the play.
Correct.
Especially, I'll just keep using Detroit since that's kind of our bread and butter here. But a lot of people have Progressive for car insurance, or Cure auto insurance. Cure doesn't offer home insurance.
Oh, they don't? I don't know that.
Not to my knowledge,
no. Okay.
And
that makes sense.
For Progressive, they won't really even touch Detroit. They'll mm-hmm. just give you a no thank you, place it elsewhere type of thing. Mm-hmm. So if you're shopping around for homeowners, I always ask for a copy of your current auto insurance policy. Mm-hmm. If it makes sense to bundle it with a new carrier, both home and auto, awesome. If it doesn't and it makes more sense to keep it separate, I'll let my clients know that too. And it's just kind of, you got to look at insurance as a whole, home and auto together. How much are you spending per year? What makes sense for you?
Makes sense. Okay. I think that's something I feel like I run into a lot when I'm talking to clients, because I'll say, oh, hey, you definitely want to talk to an insurance broker. Here's why. And then they're just like, oh, I'm just going to use who I use, who I currently use. Because people are just so like, for one, they don't want to spend the time to go through the process. And then the other side is, they feel like, hey, maybe I'll get a better deal by going through that same carrier, but not understanding that you could get an even better deal if you went with a different carrier that did both also.
Yeah, I mean, it just depends on the company and how they're doing in that area and how their last year in that area looked, and if they want to take on more risk there. So
makes sense.
Yeah, definitely check your options if you're bundling.
Makes sense. So I know you mentioned the one discount starting earlier than later, right? That 2-week time period. What would you say if you can think of any other ways a buyer could get a better incentive or a better discount on the insurance?
So for primary homeowners, I would say definitely the bundling is a huge one. Okay. The early shopping discount, so 2 weeks before closing or earlier. Mm-hmm. An alarm system discount, that's one. It's not nearly as much as these alarm companies claim that you're going to be saving, but it is a discount. The more lines of business you have under one company, the better the discounts. The more cars you have on one policy, the better the discount.
Makes sense.
I mean, there's a lot of options. Some carriers have discounts for veterans or first responders, things like that. If you're an investor and you have a management company taking care of your investment portfolio, you'll get a discount.
Okay.
Yeah.
I didn't know that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Having a property manager versus not having a property manager.
Right, because that's their sole purpose. You're doing your 9 to 5, your kids, all that other stuff, and you might not be driving by to see how that rental's doing.
Makes sense. Yeah. That's what most people do.
Yeah, especially for the out-of-state investors.
Yeah,
it's
they're nowhere around here.
Yeah.
Exactly. So, if you could give one piece of advice, like, hey, if I could jump into the minds of everyone who is looking to buy a property, who just got under contract, what's one piece of advice you would give a new buyer who just got under contract for a house?
I would say to definitely not waive your inspection.
Yeah.
And shop your insurance before your inspection hits. Make sure your insurance broker, if you don't have one, call me. But make sure they're keeping you, your lender, your real estate agent, everyone's on the same page. Less stress for you as a home buyer, especially as a first-time home buyer. As far as professionals go, if you don't have a trusted insurance broker, call me.
Call Jessica.
The days of just letting clients kind of do what their parents did or their auto insurance, you have to protect your clients, you have to protect your business. Yeah, just make sure that you've got connections.
Absolutely. All right, perfect. So last thing here, if someone wants to look up Jessica.Dodge, where would they go? Like, where would they find Jessica to reach out to you?
Pretty much Instagram, mostly Instagram.
What's your Instagram?
At insured by _Jess.Dodge.
We'll put it down here somewhere.
Down here.
Yeah, down here.
And Facebook, also Goosehead Insurance, Jessica.Dodge. Or email.
What's your telephone number?
586-206-9500. And my email is Jessica.Dodge, like the car, DODGE, at goosehead.com.
Yeah, and we'll put the email up here.
Up here
with the email. All right, perfect. Well, hey, thanks for chatting. Again, we love Jessica. She helps our clients every single day. So I wanted to, of course, highlight her and bring her in and allow her to kind of explain the ins and outs and some of the things that you should be looking at and doing as a real estate agent, loan officer, or as a buyer with looking to buy a new property.
Thank you guys. Love you too, Cyrus.
Peace.